continual iterative refinement, and you think you end up somewhere that's
problem.
better.
Yeah, you take
and
the
then
wrong path.
You reflect and you're like, oh,
right.
this is actually
you got
bad.
skewed somewhere.
Well, the problem is that you don't have a reference.
We've had customers from time to time mention that once they know our products and then they meet us or know us, that now they see like why it's designed the way it is, because they get to see the personality of the designers, of the people that designed it. And you know, and it's true. I mean, I've had this happen over the years with various products where they say, oh, you know, they talk to me on the phone or whatever, and they're like, oh, now I understand, you know, the design, why it's designed like that, you know. And it might be the type of music you listen to, it might be your personality or whatever, but they're equating you to the product, which when you think about it, it makes sense. Right?
Yeah, you do see this a bit, and sometimes it's not so obvious, but when you really kind of get into it, oftentimes the personality of whoever designed the thing, whoever it was made for, kind of sort of shines through into the final product. In the headphone industry, I think it's a great example of that, because you could find some people that are pretty unique individuals in this industry.
And therefore have unique products.
That's right. That's why you see headphones that are so different.
Yep.
And they're not really designed for the same function necessarily. Maybe the end result is they produce audio, but they're designed to do different things. And they got pros and cons, but they're made for different people.
It's not just headphones too, it's amplification.
Sure.
The sound of an amplifier.
Well,
you know?
anything.
Yeah, the way it's designed, the way it looks, the way it works. I mean, even the prices to some extent, right? There's some people, it's like they want the best they could get for $100, $200.
I remember years ago, I did a show, a trade show with Mark O'Brien from Rogue Audio, and they make like, you know, lower cost, nice,
Well, not
relatively value oriented.
yeah, value oriented, not low cost.
Yeah, not low cost, but I'm saying relatively value oriented, where you know you get 100 watts out of an amp for, you know, relatively inexpensive compared to what in the high end would be. Anyway, bottom line is I did my first show with the man, and so we're in a room for a couple days together, you know. And as the day goes on and it gets toward the end of the show, he starts to crank the living shit out of the system. It's a 2-channel speaker system we're talking, you know, amp, preamp, all that. And things get louder and louder until the show finally ends, and we, you know, wind up having a few scotches or whatever the hell we were having, bourbons or whatever. But the point was that you know, when you meet the man and how he likes his music, you understand why, like, he doesn't make 20 watt or 5 watt tube flea amps, right? He's got a lot of power. Like, you know, the big monoblocks we got from them, right? They have 8 KT88s or so, or KT120s, I don't know what it's per amp. They're like 225 watt tube monoblocks, right? Not too many companies make 200 plus watt monoblocks. So you just see the personality, you know, where he's like, he wants to crank the rock and roll. He likes the power. And so he's made these toys in part because that's who he is.
Well, it makes sense. If you think about it, of course, typically when people are making a thing, it's because they can't buy it. At least you hope. You know, if you already have it from someone else, what's the point? So inevitably, you like to see a product that's unique in the market. And it would make sense. It seems to be logical that it would follow that you would make something that nobody else makes in a unique, interesting way that kind of sort of reflects what you value, what you're looking for. And I do think you could see a bit with something like Diana and 1266. There's a little bit of something going on there. They're very unusual.
Yeah, they definitely
Headphones
they have their own attitude that reflects off of our attitudes, I would assume. It's in a lot of ways.
Presumably, I don't know.
Yeah.
Couldn't really tell you.
Well, I mean, I guess. I mean, we made it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a beast, right? We ran it over with a Jeep.
Yeah, as
and
you do.
I don't think there's any other headphone in the world that you will be able to run over with a Jeep and then give it to somebody, and they currently are using it still today. We know the guy that has it. And he has had no warranty issues either.
We put the challenge out there for other manufacturers to do the same.
Yeah.
And it seems like Raul sort of kind of took us up on that. They ran over.
Yeah.
They had a little
Did they?
snippet. Yeah, they ran over a component.
Yeah.
Oh.
You know, it was like the shell. It's kind of little.
Right.
I like to see the whole headphone run over.
Right.
That's the challenge.
Well, the headband was blah.
Well, just a side cup.
Yeah.
It is kind of hard to
It's
run
still
over
pretty cool,
headphones.
though. I mean,
They're not made
that's a
for it.
tough part.
Yeah, it is. It looks like a HP MJF or something like that. Maybe a glass fiber reinforced.
And back in the day when they made real microphones, I think you could have run those damn things over those machined or cast aluminum mics that they used to have. The big ones. You could probably run that over with a truck. It'd be all right.
Right. There's
They
a
were
good
solid,
design criteria.
round. Yeah, like almost like an egg in its design.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's true.
I mean, well, mics back then, if it's going to be broadcast, you're not like holding it. If it's in the design criteria, if you had to like carry it around, you don't want a big heavy mic. But
Right.
if it's just going to be sitting on your desk on a stand, then
Yeah, they were like probably tipping over all the time, falling from the stands 6 foot down on the floor, and they
Denting the floor.
and you just pick it up and it just keeps working.
that's right.
Yep.
So yeah, real mics.
Well, I think the best example of like a designer that after you see them, you really understand the product better is Johnny Ive, right?
Yeah,
Because like you watch his little videos,
yeah.
and it's like, yep, sure seems like he made this design this Apple product,
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense because you look at him, it seems pretty likely that he really cares about the aesthetics, the design, the appearance, and he considers that to be a functional attribute of the component, which to some extent is true. However, he also seems to be very willing to remove features and amenities to improve the aesthetics. So yeah, depends on the person. Some people value that enough that is a characteristic they're looking for. They want it to be clean, even though it doesn't really have enough ports sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. And other
Imagine-
people, exact opposite.
Well, you look at the supercars out there too. It's probably the same thing. You look at the
Yeah.
owners
Oh,
of the
yeah.
companies like Koenigsegg and
Yeah.
stuff like that. The dude is into his toys. I mean, he's really into his toys, and he's building it because he really likes to make shit like that.
Well, yeah, and they
know?
like to make every single part too.
Yeah,
They're like, we want to control everything about our build.
yeah. The attention to detail is just crazy, just
Yeah.
crazy.
You look at especially like the marketing material for any high-end brand where they actually could afford to do wacky stuff. You look at like what Bugatti is talking about, what they show you, what they consider to be valuable in their product. Totally different than like Koenigsegg or any other boutique manufacturer, right? They're talking about kind of sort of two different things, even though they're sort of competing in the same space. They're both making like multi-million-dollar hypercars.
And I'm sure if you drove each of those cars, they'd have a completely different feel.
Totally
Yeah,
different.
Totally. I mean, everything about it.
Yeah, even
know?
though they're both like 1,500 horsepower,
Right. They do it a very
hypercars.
different way.
Yeah, right.
And it's strange because for whatever reason from the outside, a lot of people say, well, you both make headphones, aren't you competitors? It seems logical, but in practice, it doesn't really seem to work that way. Although sort of you're competing for the customer, kind of, you're not making the same product. And I guess it's to some extent true in a lot of industries. When you hit a high enough range, people are kind of like tailoring their products so much to their taste, to their preference, that it kind of sort of is so unique. There really isn't direct competition.
Well,
you
yeah,
might
because
say.
then what ultimately occurs if you do have this sort of focus in a certain way that other companies don't have, you attract people who enjoy, who appreciate that.
Yeah, or looking for what you look like.
It's your customer base, and they're really not interested in anything else. They're not, because they'll look at it and they'll try it, but the reality of it is they keep coming back to you because that's them.
Right.
They think that part of you is what they're after too, and it's part of them, and it's called choice.
Well, I guess like in the lower end of like anything, it's kind of hard to design because you need to design for everybody. Right? It's not, you're not focusing on one thing.
Yeah, right.
So you don't have like just a goal in mind. This is what we're looking for.
Yeah, you can't
You're just
focus.
You're like, all right, how do we satisfy as many people as possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your focus is volume. How many of these can we sell?
It's sort of the opposite.
Yeah.
And it kind of is counterintuitive in a sense. But in the high end, you're trying to make the best product possible. And most people would say, well, of course, you're trying to do that at all prices, but not really. Most low range, even mid range in some senses, they're trying to sell as many units as possible, which kind of sort of means hit enough checks for more people. You want to make it like the most average, bland,
Price being the
mundane
biggest one.
product. Right. It
it's
needs to
gotta
be a
be
certain
cheap.
price. It's got to be affordable.
Yep.
It's got to be cheap. It's got to compete in the market on price, but it also has to compete on features. It needs to do everything else does.
It's like scissors. Can you imagine how many $2 pair of scissors or dollar store scissors they
Right.
probably sell?
A
It's
lot.
got to be 100 million right a year.
lot.
Like, and then they just get bent or get shot. You drop it once,
throw
they're
'em
broke.
out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. You can just get another one for $1.
But the
Nobody
difference
thinks
is,
nothing of it.
in the dollar scissors, you don't care what brand they are. You don't really care what they
Nope.
look like.
Nope.
Nothing matters other than, are
long
they
as they
cheap?
work.
Do they work? Okay.
Yeah.
Sufficient.
Yeah.
And it's not quite like
it's
that
a
in the high
whole
end.
different kind of market, But yeah, bottom line though is that you could see where personality definitely plays a part in the finished product. And I'd imagine with larger companies, like especially when you deal with automobiles, you got so many personalities dealing with it. The focus would probably be shifted toward whoever's in charge of all production, I guess. Whoever had the vision. I mean, I don't know, like with Apple, you said Johnny Ives, right? But I mean,
Whoever has
obviously-
control, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
who
he
can-
has the last say,
Yeah.
Like the CEO, like for Koenigsegg, he is the CEO.
So he
And
probably is
he
the-
would have the last say, you would
Yeah.
think, and what direction they should go. So.
Right. And then you got your engineers that, of course, are putting a twist, their own twist on it, because they design a certain way. You tell them you're conveying what you want, but they're going to do it a certain way. The process, the procedure, the ultimate part's going to come out a certain way. So that's got to take a lot of time if you think about it, particularly if the guy with the vision is very particular.
Yeah.
It's got to take a lot of time.
Well, everybody, especially after Steve died, everybody kind of sort of came out of the woodwork talking about how he ruled with an iron fist and whatnot. And maybe to some extent you need to seemingly push people to do what he was doing for the longest time, because he seemed to make people strive for a product to just work.
To do better.
Yeah, to
do
do better.
way
Like,
better beyond
maybe
what
it's
you were taught.
technically difficult,
Yeah.
but that was seemingly one of the attributes that he really strove for.
I mean, some people didn't like that, obviously, but other people, I think, really, it was probably a life lesson for him when you think about it, to work for a man like that. You take that with you, right? He's gone, but you got that with you. You've got to be more valuable to other people. I mean, how many people they probably hired away from the company? But bottom line is that you're learning his personality in a lot of respects, or his needs, and it was obviously successful. So I would think that would be an in-demand situation. But anyway, in our little niche industry, it's there are a lot of personalities.
Yeah, you get some sort of eccentric people at times,
Yeah.
and I guess that makes sense, because if you're a regular average person, well, there's probably already a bunch of products that suit you. Why would you feel compelled to put the effort into make a company? Because it's very difficult, typically.
I know in the two-channel world, the speaker world, it's the same thing. The
Oh,
guys
yeah.
that makes the electronics, the guys that make the speakers, you listen to a pair of speakers and the guy that made them, or the owner, or the designer, it fits them like a glove.
Yeah, it all checks out.
Well, I mean, it's pretty, because it's like, well, they're best at this type of music, and he listens to that, so that makes sense, right?
Yeah, some guys are into classical, and it's like, okay, well, that speaker's kind of boring and soft because they like classical. I mean, boring in our sense.
Yeah.
Where if you threw rock and roll on it, it'd probably it wouldn't be good.
Right.
You want something. You need like some couple, like a good 4 or 5 15-inch subs in a room. Now we're talking. So it's a whole different attitude depending on the music you like to listen to. And
Yeah, I guess, everybody's trying to do the same thing, right? But differently.
yeah, right. So again, if that fits you, if you're the consumer or the customer, that fits you. Bam! You found your niche. You found your company. You found the guys that you want to. And I guess you see that with customers all the time. They're guys that will always kind of use a similar headphone
Yeah.
or similar brand. They kind of stick with it. It fits them.
Well, it works.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they like it. So.
Until something changes.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And then they're like,
which
"I need to
sometimes
find
is
a new one."
experience. They just get older, they get wiser, and or their music tastes change.
Or they have windfall cash, and now they could
Yeah,
buy whatever they want.
That helps too. Yeah, having money always helps.
Usually it solves problems.
Yeah, it solves a lot of problems. Yeah.
Generally, every choice you make as a designer is a compromise. There's almost always some price to be paid. It could be financial, it could mean you have to raise the price of the product. It could be you can't have this feature or that feature. So finding the product that's designed towards what you're looking for, that's kind of an important thing.
Yep.
And that's really all people are doing. They're taking their personality into account. They're saying, what would I want as a consumer in a product? And what would I not really care about enough so I could put the emphasis elsewhere?
That's assuming you're serious about what you're choosing. Some people, when they go to get something, they could really give a shit.
Some people don't care.
As long as it's green, I'm good.
It is a little interesting because
know?
you could even see corporate structures. I mean, it kind of only works in larger companies, but you could kind of see like the way the company works in products at times.
Yeah.
You look at like a product, like a mass market product like Apple. or something like that. You could kind of sort of tell somebody had a unified vision, and most likely due to the complexity was barking orders. That's kind of sort of the only way this thing works, telling someone else what to do. And then you look at some products, really niche boutique products, that clearly there may have been one or two people working on it and they had a weird vision that nobody else was doing and they went towards that. And then you look at other companies like Rimac or whatever, the electric hypercar company. You could see everyone there apparently is committed because the product is so technical, so engineering heavy and focused. And it's kind of curious how obvious that can be just by looking at the product. You know, it really shows you what they cared about when they were designing it, because a lot of times you can't hide these things. If you're designing a product for durability, repairability, a lot of times it's pretty obvious in the end result. If you're designing it to be serviceable for a long period of time, well, usually it means a different design, different characteristics and features so that the end user could replace, repair, whatever.
Well, let's think back for like years. Let's go
Years.
back. Let's go back 100 years.
100.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I'm back
100.
What
100
were they
years.
thinking when they made the original clothes washing thing where you roll the clothes through 2 rollers to squeeze? Basically, you dip the clothes in a bucket, or I guess that some of them even had some thing.
Well,
that held
things like
water.
that almost always are kind of sort of more or less just evolved around what's available at the time, what people knew, what people understood. And it was probably because those rollers were commercially available and they didn't
Probably.
expect to have huge volume.
It was before electricity, probably too.
Right.
But I don't know. Probably most people don't know what we're talking about. Maybe we'll throw
Yeah,
a
those
picture
like
of it.
things you
Yeah,
wring the clothes
you
through,
wring
whatever.
you wring your clothes through
washboard.
until the kind of
It
dry
was the
and hang them up.
limitation of the technology of the day. you
Yeah.
know?
Nobody was investing huge sums of money developing new technology for a product like that, because I'm assuming the thought at the time was it washes clothes, who cares?
Or
right?
the guy that made the first AM radio that you would put in your home and listen to a radio station, right? It was a 5-tube. We learned this when I went to high school, we learned it in electric class, but the 5-tube AM radio was the most popular. You only needed 5 tubes.
Ooh.
Someone had to figure that all out, you know, to receive an AM station. And, you know, and most of them were RF tubes, and then you had one tube that amplified the audio. But the point is that they simplified this thing down to the most simplest form was that. And then later marketing took over, and you had 10 and 15 tube radios because people thought the more tubes the better.
Yeah, it's definitely better.
When all they did was stick them in there and they were glowing, but they didn't get used. They weren't part of the circuit. They only needed the 5 tubes. They never needed more than 5. So,
Right.
But anyway, my point is that so that's a different personality there. Oh, let's make it glow like crazy, you know.
Yeah,
all
that's
these
how it
tubes-
always goes, right?
Yeah.
You have the basic function out of the gate, and then people realize, how can we make it better?
Yep.
And sometimes it's physically complicated because maybe you need to develop a totally new technology. In the case of like maybe an AM radio, it's hard to really make a 15, 20 tube radio actually perform better when it's already working fine.
Right.
So maybe they just did it for the novelty because consumers could be easily misled into thinking it's superior.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like razor blades, you know.
Yeah,
Start out with
right.
1, and now we're at like 7.
Yeah.
You know? It's like-
Because it's better, right?
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But you don't really know as a consumer. How could you?
But
You don't have
test
any
them all.
data. I don't
You
know.
get every-
Does it
every-
work better?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
It
6.
doesn't cut a sheet of paper test.
No,
Right.
no. You're like skin irritation tests, you know.
Oh, for shaving.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff
Straight
like
up
that.
shaving.
Yeah.
It's very difficult as a consumer to really know. And if you have large companies marketing to you, well, I don't know. Maybe what they say is true. Maybe it isn't. How can you prove?
Yep.
But in our industry, it's like usually a few people in a company, and you can talk to the people that designed it, built it,
Yep.
and then you get to know them, and
Yeah.
you know the product better.
Yep. Especially at the shows. Yeah. You understand their line of thought, what they were contemplating, what they, you know, why it's designed like that. And then, you know, a lot of people actually should, you know, when you before just as a hint too, just as a thing where you look at when anyone critiques a product, you should try to understand the direction it's coming from. You shouldn't just take it at face value. It's, you know, the old adage where, you know, don't take a book at, you know, don't judge
Yeah.
a book by its cover.
Yeah, it's hard to do sometimes though.
You
It
know?
is.
Yeah.
And that is definitely a reasonable point that people often overlook. And there's certainly a lot of applications where the design is just bad. Something just works poorly.
Sure.
However, I think people should assume that whoever designed or made this product meant well, was trying to do the best. And that doesn't mean they always get a gold star, of course. but sometimes they have a different perspective. They're trying to do something different than what you're looking for, and the
that's
product
something-
just isn't for you.
Yeah, and that's something you should try to understand, though, because it is, even though it does come from a different direction, it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right.
It just means it's different, or it doesn't suit you. I remember when we first came out with this AB 1266, it was the same thing. And even today, people are going, they put it on their head right at the show. We just did the show, right, on Can Jam, and they were like, oh, this thing's way more comfortable than I thought. Because you look at it, but they've
Yeah, a lot of people
they've
said
never
that.
put it on their head before. And it's
Right.
like, oh, this is actually no problem.
You always
It's
do. They
easy.
make assumptions.
Yeah, just
And
by the
yeah.
look of something.
Right.
Yeah, and it's usually you think that, especially at this level, that somebody's thought that through already. It's kind of
Well, you hope. Jay Leno always likes to talk about how putting like an old classic car back to the way it was stock is always the best, because then it's the initial intent of the guy who designed it,
Yeah.
because things get modified over 80 years or something,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, this thing sucks. And it's like, no, if you put it back to the way it was,
right.
it's usually better.
Yeah, I could see that. I remember years ago, back in the day, I always say when I worked for Bowers and Wilkins, here I go again, but in the mid 80s, the 801, I think it was Series 2 at the time, it was a $5,000 speaker. People would buy this speaker, and they would go, and there were guys that would modify this. This is a 130-pound speaker, big cabinet, right? And guys would go in, and they would physically take the grill top off the top of this big cabinet, bore holes in the wood so that you could fit as much shot to weigh down a cabinet. Lead shot, they'd fill the top of the cabinet with lead shot and cover it. And I could go on and on. External crossovers for it, where the big, massive box for each speaker with a crossover with a shit ton of components. And it's, and I remember one guy, we had a customer once, and he came to us, and he's like, he was practically crying. He's like, can I just get another pair of speakers? Because I've ruined mine. He did so many things to it, and then he went to a store and heard a stock pair of speakers, and it blew away his 10,000 plus dollar modifications to his speakers. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't even realize what I've done.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of funny. I could see where Jay's coming from, where he's talking about the same thing with old cars. It's like, this was the way it was made. This is the real piece of gear, not.
Clearly, you could improve on old things, but you need to know what you're doing. If you're just tinkering, I've screwed things up. It's like,
yeah.
this is
It's
way
easy to
worse
do.
than
Yeah.
I got. You need to
You
do
have
one.
to learn.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's always like that, but a lot of times you improve one thing and you make something else worse, and maybe the overall differential is kind of negative. Like you actually made overall the sound is slightly worse, but you improved one thing enough, it's kind of like encouraging. You think, oh, well, I changed the sound. I changed something. Now I think I could fix this other problem. And you kind of sort of keep going down a path of continual iterative refinement, and you think you end up
That's
somewhere
the
that's
problem.
better.
Yeah.
You take
And
the
then
wrong path.
You reflect and you're like, oh,
Right.
this is actually
You got
bad.
skewed somewhere.
Well, the problem is that you don't have a reference. If you don't
You
have
lost it.
another
Yeah.
stock one to compare it to,
Yep.
your reference keeps changing,
Right.
and that doesn't
You're
work.
in your own bubble.
Yeah.
You see this in every industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cars, super common, audio, right? I've seen quite a few people modify headphones, and there's like almost no redeeming quality. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're totally different, but sometimes they modify them and it's just worse.
Well, the reality of it is a
subjectively.
piece of foam does not make a headphone. And that's
Well,
the
some
biggest,
people go
that's
way-
the most popular modification is
Well, yeah.
let's shove a piece of foam or some sort of absorbent
Yeah, it's
material
a
somewhere.
quick tweak.
But,
Yeah, but at
that's-
least,
it'll
at
help
least
it.
it's not destructive.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right. As long as you could put it back to the way it was.
That's cool though. If you could actually unmodify it,
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people are like cutting holes and like filling things up with glue or something. It's just so destructive.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, in the end, understanding the intent of the designer is cool. Well, it seems like once people do, they're like, oh,
Oh, I get it.
yeah. And all of a sudden, whatever would concern them goes away. It's crazy how that works. right?
Strangely, yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's one of those human nature things that we seem to pop up in our conversations from time to time.
I guess.
Or we keep butting heads against. I don't know, depending on how you look at
Well,
it.
we have a very polarizing headphone, so I guess
Sure.
maybe we get a bit more than other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, it's not exactly mass market
No.
appeal.
No, I think that's pretty
And we
straightforward.
kind of did it on purpose. I mean, it was for multiple
Well, there was
purposes.
a design intent.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But also, we knew that it would get attention because of its shape, right? And
Sure.
and it started our company.
Well, it
so,
did.
Yeah, totally.
And it's still here.
We were in the wild. Remember, we were in the wildest magazines. We had cooking magazines that wanted to feature our headphones.
Yeah.
They're like, this is like wild. We had magazines, people, all kinds of
A bunch of fashion magazines and stuff like that, blogs.
Yeah, they wanted it in photography and photo shoots as a
Right.
prop or something. It's like, wow, we still get that
Yeah.
from time to time. So it's kind of funny how that works. But yeah, people think it's cool. Especially the guys that are into their metal and stuff like that. It fits the part, I guess. So,
Right.
But anyway.
That's a pretty good ramble.
Yeah, we went on and on and on
Yeah.
and on. So yeah. Anyway, that's expected. Coming back to the beginning, yeah. Try to pick out the personality of the designer in anything in front of you: a knife or a plate or a camera or a flash. Or,
It works better in the higher end.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Consumer
yeah.
stuff is
There's
kind of
there's a lot more thought going
made
on.
to be generic.
Yeah, but try to understand it. Just try to understand it. And you'll probably find that there's a lot of cool shit to learn when you understand what the guy was thinking. So take care, everybody. Thumbs us up if you like this. Have a good one.